Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Teachers Lab. It is an honor to have you all here as we embark on a meaningful and insightful session focused on Indigenous-led education. I'm Davide Gretto, Youth Education Specialist at the Workforce Forum within the Food and Agriculture Organization's Office of Youth and Women. The Youth Education Program, through its Educators Network, provides the tools, skills, and network, supporting educators in their agri-food system education project, fostering both personal and professional growth. Formal and non-formal educators who are part of the network can also share their project, their lesson learned, and challenges faced within this network as we aim to build a strong community of practice. The network is structured around four key pillars: the Teachers Lab, as we are today, an interactive learning session with agri-food experts, a discussion space as a platform to exchange insight and best practices, the network meetings, opportunities to connect with fellow educators globally, and finally, resource sharing platform, a space for educators to co-develop agri-food system educational materials. For today's session, you will hear from three young Indigenous educators from North America. They will share about their different approaches to Indigenous-led education and how values inform their teaching and mentorship. They will also discuss how identify connection to place, their Indigenous food systems and service to one's community shapes the work that they do. We will close with a Q&A session, followed by a final closing remarks and the next steps on how you can get involved. The three remarkable Indigenous educators are Derek Nicholas, Anpon Jensen, and Daryl Kutene, who bring deep wisdom, lived experience, and innovative approaches to their teaching. Derek is a member of the Red Cliff Band of Ojibwe and the founder of Wising LLC. His mission is to revitalize Indigenous food systems amongst tribal communities, specializing in food sovereignty and advocacy work. He has been working within the food system in many critical ways, included but not limited to work around food security and sovereignty, language revitalization, seed saving, white food identification, culinary arts, youth engagement, and the creation of educational resources. Thanks, Derek, for being here. Anpo is a woman from the Pine Ridge Reservation, is an engineering writer and advocate for Indigenous-led solution in global health and climate change. She holds a BS in environmental system engineering and a master in civic and environmental engineering from Stanford University, where she was the first Native woman of the Students' Global Health Board. Her work integrates global policy and Indigenous frameworks into STEM projects worldwide. She has served as an environmental health specialist for the International Indian Trading Council and a youth representative for the Black Hills Silux National Council and the North America focal point of the UN Global Indigenous Youth Caucus. She has also influenced UN policy and Indigenous languages and health and participated in global environmental governance, including serving as a UNEP, GYBN co-chair on the Global Biodiversity Youth Initiatives. Recognized for her impact, she has been featured in Forbes magazine, the Native American 40 Under 40 list, the Lancelet, and the Oxford Climate Review, among others. Thank Ampo Jensen for being here today with us. Daryl Kootenai is from the Iyarke Nakoda Nation of Southern Alberta, Canada. He's best known today for his role as the co-executive director of the Whole Experience, business owner of the Bold Eagle Consulting, a co-founder of the Nakoda Youth Council, and faculty member for the Banff Center for Indigenous Leadership, and a current North American focal point for the Global Indigenous Youth Caucus. Daryl is a traditional dancer and singer. He loves spending time outdoors and as a hunter-gatherer in the Rocky Mountains pursuing big game. Also loves spending time with his horses and of course with his family and beautiful wife, Ariel. Before we dive into today's session, let me highlight that Indigenous peoples community, upload diverse, long-standing knowledge systems around the world that foster sustainability, resilience, and community well-being. As we move forward in this session, we want to be mindful of the shifting the narrative from one of deficit to one of strength, highlighting the profound contributions of Indigenous peoples' education systems that have supported and empowered people for generations and continue to do so today. Throughout today's sessions, we will explore identity, connection to place, Indigenous food system, and community service shape the work of our speakers. This is an opportunity to not only listen and learn, but also to reflect on how we, as educators, can integrate Indigenous people's perspective and approaches into our own teaching practices in ways that honor, respect, and uplift these traditions. Thank you for being part of this learning experience. I now want to invite to meet Derek and prepare for an engaging and thought-provoking discussion. Over to you, Derek.
Oh, bonjour, Kino. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to first extend my thanks and gratitude to the FAO for holding this space and allowing me to be a presenter and to share this space with two educators that I think so highly of. Um, Additionally, I'd like to just mention that I don't speak for all Native Americans or all Anishinaabe people. I'm just sharing stuff that I believe in, stuff that I was taught. So this is purely coming from me, and I hope that my colleagues will agree with some of the things I talk about this morning. So when we were coming up with the problem statement, we were kind of really looking closely at the modern educational system. And we see that it's very single faceted, that it's not really adheres to an individual. So it's very contrast like Indigenous-led education, where it's more holistic and it's personalized to each individual student or individual, kind of focusing on their interests, passions, and talents. And when you do this, it only nurtures the individual growth, but also brings a deeper connection to their culture, their community. So right now, it's really important to try to find ways to integrate this practice into our mainstream systems of education because it's often very standardized from nation to nation. So um, when we the way that we came to knowledge is Anishinaabe people. Um, it mostly came through observation. There's a lot of different revenues that how we understood the world and how we gained information, but we mostly like just observed the world around us. And this is a perfect example of how we figured out how to survive was learning from the plants, the animals, and all of nature that was around us. There wasn't in Anishinaabe mowing language, there isn't a word for nature. And I find it interesting that most indigenous cultures around the world, they don't have a word for nature as well. And that's because we are nature. We are part of nature. And once we start to define that we're not a part of nature, that's when the unbalance happens, right? So we belong to nature and we're not above it or below it, and we're all in this together. So this is like a perfect example here of that squirrel of how we learn from them. Uh, Obviously, they like to gather their nuts. That's one of their primary food sources. And this tree here is an acorn tree, an oak tree. That's specifically red oaks, as you can tell by the nut or the fruit. And these squirrels, they gather these red acorns and they bury them in the ground. And the reason is because they contain tannins, which are very toxic, not very toxic, but when you eat very high quantities of them, it can be toxic to your body. And they allow the rain to come down and wash out all the tannins in the soil. And once when they're clean and ready to use, they dig them up and they consume them. So we're like, oh, that's how we used to do it. That's how we should do it. So then we got the idea of to gather these acorns and make nets and put the acorns in there and stick them in the rivers where that river water can wash out those tannins, cold leach them, like that process. So that's a big idea of what Indigenous-led education looks like. It's observing what's around us through nature and incorporating those tools and techniques that we see from our relatives. So today I'm going to talk about what Indigenous-led education looks like, which is land-based education, learning from the land. And I just thought I'd throw in these two funny pictures of this beaver. There's one goofy beaver and one little cute little baby beaver. So I'm going to say what a workshop looks like, a beaver workshop looks like. This is something that I teach, something that I'm very passionate about, and just to show how diverse this education can look like. So not only this education, it goes so long lasting. It goes thousands and thousands and thousands of years. We often have these stories, Alu Sukanag, those are our sacred stories that we only tell in the wintertime about these giant beavers. And when we tell these stories, some people just think we're crazy, like, oh, they're just making stuff up. But there's fossils to prove this. This is like one of the name of the species, the scientific name, the giant beaver. I'm not gonna try to pronounce it. And then we also have the Bajimoen, which is our personal stories. Or just kind of history and whatnot. So we're hitting that that education right there, and it's such rich education. So there's like stories about how these beavers came to be, how they brought different plants and medicines, and then it even talks about like the sickness that beavers have experienced throughout time. This was even prior to colonialization. Like there was diseases in North America. There would be times where the beavers got very sick, and we would have to avoid eating those. So it was like something that we're kind of seeing now today, populations being messed up by diseases and stuff like that. So we can use this history, use these stories to empower us to make educated decisions moving forward. Um, and they even got stories about like before the ice age. So we were here for thousands and thousands of years and we survived like the freezing of the world and the thawing out. So when you kind of think about climate change, how things are always changing like that, we have those stories that we can use to use that information to keep us surviving, and it's an important element to start to ponder because we have the keys to survive. It's thousands of years of information all tied together. And then we also just, with this beaver, they have over 12,000 hairs per square centimeter. So one of like the warmest furs. So we can make fashion out of this. You see that beaver hat, those beaver mitts. You can even make clothes out of it or whatnot. So it's for those who are maybe interested in arts or fashion, this is a great thing that they can do. Furthermore, it hits on the science and like science and math. So if you want to like study the engineering or physics behind like beavers lodges, how the effects of beavers dams have on like the ecosystems and ecology, it's all here. All the information is here. And also just studying like anatomy or whatnot when we're butchering beaver. But yeah, the beavers offer so much to us. Even like you're thinking about climate change, going back on this topic because I know it's a big thing that the United Nations likes to talk about on the World Food Forum. Well, these beavers, they actually help prevent drought. They spread the water across the land and retain a lot of water. So they have the tools to, prevent climate change. And with climate change, we're starting to see a lot of things happening already. I know up at my reservation, Red Cliff, starting to find like Kirklees Club up there, red hairy skunk currents, which aren't usually grow that far north. And furthermore, like our moose populations, they've been traveling way up north up into Canada. It's kind of hard to find moose in Minnesota nowadays because they need the really cold winters to kill off any of the parasites and ticks off them. Culinary arts, beavers, they offer so much nutrition. They're one of like the only animals that eat the plants on the land and the water, and all of that absorbs right into the meat. And so learning how to like cook food, but then also like how to go catch this stuff, how to go set traps and how to, shoot them out of the water. It's important tools that, youth need to know. What's that phrase? You give a man a fish, he eats for a day. You teach a man how to fish, he eats for a lifetime. And this is I don't know, very elementary stuff. This is stuff that we've been doing for thousands of years. It's kind of common knowledge that we should be teaching our young ones how to survive because it's good to not be reliant on the government or be reliant on civilization. We should be self-reliant and be able to, work within our communities to take care of ourselves. And when teaching, I like to cater to like the youth. It's very easy to be prideful when you're teaching, thinking that you got all this important information and that you need to share this, you need to share that, instead of like sitting back and just allowing the education to happen how it should. Because I see education as a very spiritual thing. Before I go teach anywhere or speak anywhere, I try to pray. I always do pray and just allow myself to get out of my way and allow that spirit of knowledge, the spirit of goodness to speak through me and allow me to share any information that needs to be shared that day. So I might be going to a class and they want me to talk about wild rice, but instead I talk about trees, right? So prayer is a very important thing to me and like the way that I lead my education because it's all about observation. So for me to like just be prideful and just talk, 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 talk and not allow myself to listen or read the room, that's doing injustice to whoever I'm teaching. So like listening to the youth, that's how we like grow as a people. Because I might be the teacher, but our Indigenous-led education, it's mutual. We're like exchanging ideas, we're learning from each other, and they might not be interested in what I have to teach. Like I should just kind of like see what they want to learn. So last week I was doing a raccoon demo over at the Minnesota Historical Society, and one of the girls was like, "Is this a boy or a girl?" I was like, "Let's go check it out." So I grabbed the legs and I split them open. I was like, "Oh, it doesn't have a penis bone right here, so it's gonna be a girl." And then we just started talking about penis bones within different animals and how they could be used for different tools or for hairpins if you're a lady. So it's fun stuff. It's really fun to just kind of like surrender and allow just the education to go how it goes. And then this beaver, it offers very great medicines. So there are like the beaver casters. It's the glands right in their pelvic region, which is a very strong medicine that we use. It's also very pungent, so it has like a nice vanilla flavor. So people used to make perfumes out of that. I think a lot of people still do make perfume out of that in European countries, like really the expensive perfumes. And then it also makes great bait. So if you're like setting live traps, you can put some of that in there. And then also like this red willow right here. That's what we use to make our traditional tobacco. Well, it has a slight pain relief quality to it. So we can use that for medicine. And when the beavers, they like to chew on those things. So all that slight pain relief medicine goes right into that fat. And then you can render that fat and use that for medicine, right? So when it comes to land-based education, like it's really endless, the possibilities. It's land-based education includes language and songs and astronomy, like learning the stars and constellations, ceremony, creativity and entertainment. So like getting them off their phones and like having like use your brain. So this is like in this picture, this is like one game that Don Jones from Nigagusa First Nation in Canada taught me. It's like that's like the hip bone of the beaver, and you basically like close your eyes and hold it in one hand, and you try to like get your finger right in like the hip socket, and it's very engaging. The kids love it because it's not easy to do. I mean, it's not like you can do it maybe on your third, fourth try, but for them to all like be there supporting each other so you can get it on their first try. People just want to do it again and again. So that's another thing about how I try to lead classes. Like I try to make it fun, engaging, hands-on, and that's when I go to teach a class, I'm like, what's one way that I can make them like remember this forever? Like 20 years from now, I want those like see those like the students come together and be like, hey, you remember that one time Derek was teaching this and we ate that? So it's those things that are like very unique and creates long-lasting memories. So the reason why I wanted to like talk about all these different gifts that the beavers have is because we all have a gift too, right? And that's what our education system looks like. Every plant, every animal has a gift, and so do we. and that's what gives us life. And when we do land-based education, indigenous led education, we focus on every individual's gifts. So if someone's like really interested in trees, you'd be like, "Oh, I know that one elder. He's really good with trees. You should go spend some time with him." And you point him in the right direction, or you give him all the information you can about trees, whether it's harvesting bark, making birch bark canoes, building lodges, or whatnot. And the beaver, it talks about this, right? So some may be familiar with the Bible. There's a parable in the Bible called the parable of the talents, which is basically to sum it up, we all have a gift that we inherited from God. And if we don't use that gift, we're going to kill ourselves. Maybe not physically, but spiritually. Well, we have that same parable that we see through the beaver. So the beaver's teeth, they never stop growing in their lifetime. That's their gift, is their teeth. And they have to use this gift, so as their teeth never stop growing, if it doesn't use its gift to chop down trees, nibble on branches, its teeth will keep growing and growing and growing until it curves inwards and pierces its own body, ultimately killing itself. So we need to be like the beaver and use our gifts because not only going to help ourselves, but to help our community. And that's like a big ideology within Anishinaabe thinking is like, how can I be service to our community? And that's where you kind of fit in. That's how you find joy in your life and purpose in your life. So that's what we do when we educate others is like see what kids are interested in, what they're talented in, and try to cater to them as an individual. Because we don't all fit into this modern educational system. I know I didn't. I freaking hated school. It was sitting in a desk and learning about calculus and trig. That just wasn't for me. I knew it wouldn't really add much value to my life. So I get really passionate about this because I love teaching and just like to thank you guys for having me today. And I feel grateful to pass it on to someone that I think so highly of. I'll pass it off to Ampo. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. And I'll just share my screen real quick. Awesome. Mm, okay, can we see that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Well, hello everyone. I'm Betty Washte. Shante Washte. Na Betty Zape. Ampot Hoi Imajapi. Na Kyoksa Tioshver Mataha Nawazi Haha Alwati. Hello everyone. My name is Ampo. I'm from Pioneer, South Dakota. I'm Oglala Lakota. And I am really happy to be here and to share a little bit of my experience in education and teaching and training youth to take a strength-based approach in taking care of our land and our environment while utilizing global frameworks such as, um, the UN Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples and also other global frameworks that are being drafted worldwide. Um, Thanks again,
Thank you.
Derek. Um,
Thank you, Ampo. I just wanted to point that your screen is still loading, so maybe you could try to share that again to see if
okay,
works better.
perfect.
Thanks.
I feel like that's always going to happen with Google Slides for me. Okay, we'll just stick it on this slide like this. Okay. Um, so yeah, I'm here to talk to you a little bit about how I use frameworks and philosophy and our way of being and implement that into our projects. I really love that Derek highlighted how we learned from nature and we utilized the gifts um, of everyone. Animals do that, and we're supposed to do that, and we should continue to do that. For Lakota people, we learned a lot of our knowledge from the buffalo. Um, I'll say that they they never ran wild. They followed the stars, and so Lakota people also follow the stars. Um, and so within every constellation throughout the seasons, we would go as the constellation matched up with the land. And so that's kind of how we lived our lives, is very, very nature based and very, very aligned with the star knowledge. tied back with, our relatives. And we never really addressed animals as animals, they were always relatives. And so that philosophy in itself, makes you aware and mindful about how you go around the world. So I have a background in environmental engineering, and that's really where my advocacy began because I wanted to make sure that Indigenous peoples were included in climate change adaptation plans, and even just, solutions that we think about going forward, because a lot of what we have experienced or what we are experiencing today are symptoms of, taking people from their Indigenous peoples from their livelihoods and their lands, and preventing us from stewarding um, our territories. So we know the history. We don't really have to go into it too much, but what I do is I train youth within my community to start taking an interest in our water systems, and I use science as a tool to train them so that they'll be able to um, understand their place in this world and understand that we have a responsibility, a unique, beautiful responsibility to take care of our land. And water testing is one tool that I use to do that. Um, so Indigenous peoples, where I'm from, I'm going to skip here because I actually want to show you guys this map. So this map wasn't created by me. I pulled it from this company here. But what they did was they took our treaties that were made in 1851 and 1868, and they remapped them. So there was an Indigenous person who could do this, and they said, "I'm gonna take what these treaties say and map them from our perspective," because a lot of, the narrative maps were created back then without our input. So he did, and this is the land base that is protected under those treaties that were made over 200 years ago. And so, what I teach our young people is that this is our first climate change mitigation, adaptation, first prevention plan was to protect this entire land-based territory. And so, I always advocate if we honored the treaties and we honored um, that legally binding protection, we are also, um, contributing to the health and well-being of the earth. So I use this framework because this goes beyond reservation borders. So I was born and raised on a reservation, and I still work here today. Um, and we kind of wanted to get and expand off of the reservation to kind of expand our mind view and our worldview that we have this legally binding framework that can protect our work. So it doesn't matter where we go, it will be protected by this treaty. And so we don't have to go through our attempt is to expand our mindset beyond state borders and beyond reservation borders. And the best way to do that is let's say um, this is our territory. How do we take care of it? Um, right now, what we have to do is get more information about what's in our water. So we actually are specifically in South Dakota. We're kind of in an area where there's no data, and it is kept by the government and other maybe universities that keep retain that, and it's not really given back to our people, and we are not able to make informed decisions. And so because of that, we have this big issue. We have a lot of systemic issues. What's the best way to implement a framework? It's going to be action. And so I always tell my youth that I work with, that it doesn't matter if it's perfect or not, we're doing it and we're going to keep learning as we go. And so we have this mindset of approaching things with a growth mindset. Um, and then also, we are Indigenous, so we do prioritize our Lakota teachings first. So when we go here, what we'll do is we'll send, you know, prayers and offerings to the land, and acknowledge our relatives there that we're going to come and take samples, and that we're doing this because we want to take care of the land and we want to take care of our people. And so that's how we go about it. I always say you don't have to know our culture, you don't have to replicate that, but what you should do is respect our rights, and that's where the power of these treaties and global frameworks come in. um, Back to the point of Derek talking about gifts and honoring those gifts. So I come from an area where there's no exposure to STEM, or maybe little exposure, and they're kind of in this world where they want to help, they want to change the world, they want to address climate change, but they don't know how. So what I do is I train them through our history and show them that how brilliant our ancestors were and how we were literally we were basically like we understood the stars to a level of where we could time it right. And so we knew when to pick our plants. We knew when to travel to a certain area. We knew how to burn do controlled burns when we left so that the land would regenerate when we came back. So we had a lot of this ingrained with just who we are and who we were. And so today what we do is we continue to go to those sacred sites in alignment with the seasons. We continue to test water um, throughout the area. And the purpose of doing that is because we want to show that if we don't have to wait for the government, we don't have to wait for others, we can just do it. And our ancestors were so brilliant that they created or they took, you know, so much interest in the future generations that we have these treaties to where we can utilize them as frameworks and apply them. And we just have to take the action. We just have to do it physically. And so we're part of this larger narrative. You know, we're not the solution, but we're part of it and we're contributing to it. And that's the purpose of it. But back to the gifts, and I really want to get back to that because it's so true. There's so many youth that have different gifts and different interests. And the youth that I work with is between 18 and 35, mostly because that's the UN definition of youth too. And they're at college, you know, they're studying and I want to build their capacity up so that they can get, you know, jobs locally to help themselves. But this gift aspect is important because I've had people on my work who never did STEM. Like they're in college, but they're maybe they're taking their gen eds, but they're not interested in getting a science degree. Maybe they're getting a degree in psychology or social work or something more able to address those issues. And I love that. So when someone comes in with a different background or no background, I love that because they bring in a new perspective that this science community needs. So my favorite example is social work. I have a person who has a background in social work, but she wanted to care for the environment. She knows that it's important in our culture. She knows it's important for our mental health and spirituality. And I said, okay, let's do that. And so she talked more about her issues that she's seen in the community. And we thought, you know, have we ever really asked our community what they think about water and where they think the water comes from? And that really hasn't been done by our local governments or even the state. And so she said, no, we should create a survey. So we did, and we got a lot of really great responses. And it's so simple, it's something so simple, but what we ended up finding out was that about 80% of households have to buy their water through plastic bottles. Delivery systems call again, and they actually have a fear of drinking our water because of contamination. And that in itself was information. You know, I never think about things as negative information. It's just information that we can work with. And so I thought, you know, we can change that. What initiatives can we implement to change their perspective so that they have a positive view of water? Because it's originally what we always had of our water systems. And so there's a lot of distrust today about our man-made water systems that were kind of imposed on us. So those are things that we think about and talk about. And that's one way that I utilized the strength of somebody who had a different background but wanted to take a different approach. Um, and again, I always think the best way to like Derek with his youth and going out there and doing it and not just being in a classroom, like taking action is probably the best thing we can do. I've taught some college classes and I've walked us down the road to a different stream and we did a mock testing. What would happen if we actually tested it? Um, and so just, you know, keeping them in mind that they all have strengths, everyone has strengths, and we're not victims. We've had harsh realities, but we're still here and we're still doing the work. And we have a lot to work with. So our ancestors left us a lot of brilliant things behind, and it's up to us to continue that. And so this is one way that I want to, utilize those decisions that were made 200 years ago, and take a strength-based STEM approach. And I'm really excited to pass it off to Daryl. Again, my two colleagues here, we've met in the UN space in the world of FAO, and so we're really happy to be here to talk to all of you. So I'll let you take the ropes, Daryl.
Hey, yeah, it's Nish. Thank you, Ampo and Derek and Numbawastich, Dagunchawa, Tatankawa Gichi wa cha Toganaka Itansha, me and Gibby, Umbane, Nina Washte, Nin Marju, Ne Nagaha. It's a good day today. My relatives, I just said in my Iarhe Nakota language that it's a really nice day today and that it's raining outside where I'm zooming in from the Canadian Rockies of southern Alberta in Canada. I'm a part of the Iarhe in our language, which means mountain Nakota. I'm also half Navajo Dene on my dad's side. And I'm really happy to share this time with you all, and I'll keep it brief, but just sharing with you all a little bit about who I am and what I do. A lot of my work is rooted in currently what we call the Howl experience. And the Howl experience envisions a world where young people can access the education and experiences they need to build communities of trust, reconciliation, and reciprocity. And our mission is to offer inclusive and exceptionally safe land and community-based educational experiences that build young people's knowledge and skills in truth and reconciliation and climate justice, community, leadership, and resilience. Just double checking, you guys could see my screen? Yes.
Yeah,
Awesome.
thank
Okay.
you.
Within the Howl experience, we're a very young organization. And the whole reason why it started is I'm a current co-executive director. And it started mainly based out of how the education system today in Canada is not doing justice or is not fulfilling the needs of what, we believe education should be for young people all the way from junior high all the way up to, the age of 30. And so our organization primarily works within those age groups. Oftentimes we are working directly with community, and also with school boards and administrations, and allowing us to bring forward some of these concepts that they're having a hard time presenting in the classroom in terms of education. And so we approach education in a way that is respecting both Indigenous and non-Indigenous perspectives. And to me, as an Indigenous person, I think that's very critical. As much as we have so much ancient knowledge as Indigenous peoples, our future is different from our past. And we believe that we must know a lot of the Indigenous knowledge, components, values, and beliefs, but we also need to adapt. And that's just what our ancestors did as well, as they found ways to adapt. They found ways to survive. And in today's world, with the environment that we face, and especially in education, it's a critical tool when we share knowledge. And for many of our Indigenous peoples, that's what we were based off of. We were taught to be survivors. We were taught to be warriors. While at the same time, we were taught to be mentors and educators. And so inherently, we're taught to be a lot of things at once. So within our organizational values, we focus on 4 pillars, and these pillars is community building, resiliency in terms of individual strengths. As you heard Ampo and Derek mention the gifts, we believe that many young people do have gifts and knowledge that is inherently passed down to them, especially if they're, Indigenous. But both Indigenous and non-Indigenous, people are born with gifts, skills, and abilities. And the way society teaches us is that we don't have those, that we have to learn them, that we have to go seek them and find them. But in Indigenous values and the way we approach it within our organization is that they're already there, and it just takes certain experiences to reveal them. And so when we talk about revealing those gifts, what that does is it creates a sense of resiliency, a sense of connection to yourself, to your community, and at a national and global level as well. Today in Canada, reconciliation is a big topic. Canada recently launched a national framework, and the commission that was commissioned to look into the research of residential schools and really realizing the effects that residential schools had on Indigenous communities in Canada has really put the government of Canada in a place where they have these calls to action and they need to approach things with the consideration of recognizing Indigenous rights, while at the same time implementing these rights in a framework that's made for us now, as we know in society. And so a lot of young people, even teachers, educators, all young and old, really have no idea what reconciliation looks like because it's never been done before. So we have a lot of people that are told by the government that you need to do these 94 calls to action, mandating organizations to do these things, but also to do something they've never done before. So a lot of people are kind of experimenting, are piloting, and we believe that reconciliation does require both Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples to take approaches that are rooted in relationship, authenticity, storytelling, and really bringing action through programming and organizational for us as Howell through our programs and our organizational structure. And the last one is our climate action pillar, where we do use what we call two-eyed seeing to generate reciprocal relationships between individuals, communities, and ecosystems. Our last kind of values is our organizational principles, and this is just more so reflecting how we hold principles for each other, and that's building youth capacity, community contribution and connection, that it's exceptionally safe, that we have financial integrity, that we have responsible governance, and that we reduce barriers for vulnerable and equity deserving groups. And I really love this last one, participatory design, mainly because, as non-Indigenous peoples, sorry, as non-Indigenous peoples, usually we create a vision and a mission and essentially have this roadmap that's already drawn out, much like the Canadian government with reconciliation. Indigenous ways of doing and knowing is very community, family centered, and there's always participation within everyone at all parts of the development of anything, because this was solely based on survival. And so when we say participatory design, for example, we run programs across Canada in places like the Maritimes in New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and as well as the Yukon. And when we go to these places, we don't just bring a program with a goal to deliver this program. We kind of go there with an open mind, knowing that we need to build relationships with the local Indigenous communities there, because really they are the knowledge keepers and they are the educators of that territory. And we make sure that they are participating and we make room for them to develop and deliver these programs. Because I'm from the Rockies, it's a little bit easier as someone who works within Howell to deliver these programs, but I really appreciate how we approach these other areas, because at a faculty national level, we call them wise practices versus best practices. And wise practices essentially is doing just that, where you're going to a new place, you're bringing an idea, sorry, and you want the oldest voice in the room to help advise and bring that vision to life. And so oftentimes that oldest voice is deeply connected and rooted in with the local Indigenous peoples of that territory who know that territory the best. So how this shows up within our organization is I just wanted to highlight a program that we ran this past fall. This program it was called Harvesting Spirit. And I told Ampo and Derek that this program was created based off of our experience at the World Food Forum, the Global Indigenous Youth Forum that happened a few years ago. And Derek was there, Ampo, we were all there together. And this idea that, education needs to be brought forward in a way that is Indigenous-led, Indigenous values-based, and around food and food security and food sovereignty, that there really was no place for that. And so the best thing I love about Howl Experience is we're doing just that. We're educational structures here today aren't in a position to essentially take an idea like that, like climate crisis, like environmental issues, and really explore it in a way that's meaningful today and how it shows up. And so I really love this idea because as myself in the mountains, my communities know we're best known as guides that brought forward the first Europeans in the mountains. Um, in the end, we lost everything due to those first Europeans. Um, we also were known for our big game hunting, such as buffalo, such as elk, moose, and deer. And so in this program, we spent 6 days together, and we spent half the time in a classroom setting, really bringing forward content related to food sovereignty, food security, but also spent 2 days on or 3 days on the land. And we camped on the land and really immersed these young people in a land-based educational experience that was curated and brought forward by Indigenous communities. And when we talk about Indigenous education, I think it's really important to capture the importance of evaluating and the importance of, when we talk about the gifts of young people, the way that we bring that forward is through this picture here on the right. Um, there was a video that was shared in the resource list for all of you that are participating today, and the video is of this program. And the first couple of days, we had the opportunity to partner with the municipality of Canmore, the town of Canmore, where they were running a National Indigenous Peoples Reconciliation Day. And we had the opportunity to bring our young people to volunteer in that experience. And this is the community pillar, is where they volunteered, they're in community, they're engaging with community. But also at the end, we debriefed with members of that coordinating body from the town, their municipality, and we were able to ask them certain questions about their event that they hosted, which was really, really nice. A lot of young people had a really good experience and time, but also, to us, education means having important conversations, and we were able in this circle to ask important questions to the coordinators, such like, what is your knowledge of the local Indigenous community members? You're hosting an Indigenous event. What is your knowledge? What is your connection to truth and reconciliation? Because oftentimes municipalities are obligated and sometimes are not given the proper awareness. In this case, we knew some of the people, and they were hosting in a really good way. Um, and so these circles are super important. And jumping into the land-based component, I think hands-on approaches are really fundamental for Indigenous land-based learning. When we think land-based, that's all that comes to my mind, is that we're out of a classroom, we're on the land, and we're learning with our hands, and we're also deeply connected. When we're working with this, we say tano in our language, meat. When we're working with a hide, with the picture on the left, people don't know that we're we're deeply connected with a lot of the knowledge systems that were shared with us through various different family and community members. And we're thinking about those individuals as we're learning these things. And for us, that's a sense of community and connection that we naturally get when we go out onto the land. We don't get those things when we're in a classroom, so it's very hard to essentially open up certain kind of knowledge components within your knowledge membrane or within your genetics. For Indigenous peoples, we say that the land's DNA is the same DNA within our mind, our body, and in our spirit. And so those come alive when we're out on the land and we're engaging in things like this. And for non-Indigenous participants to engage in these things, it's their first time. A lot of them are even vegetarians who, just love the process and are pushing themselves to go through it, but are just deeply rooted in it and loving the experience at the same time. There's lots of laughter, lots of stories that come up, and really just creates an environment for really important, authentic learning experiences. Just to kind of end here in a few slides, the ultimate outcome of that program, my goal for the 2 days on the land was we were to cut wachutha, which is dry meat, and that's what these participants were able to create. And we made a big smokehouse and we smoked this. It was elk meat that my brother harvested, and the picture on the right here, these were the 3 top meat cutters that had the biggest, nicest cuts of meat. So we had a little competition of who can cut meat the best. Even myself, I'm not good at it. I can hunt and harvest, but when it comes to meat cutting, that's where my skills diminish a little bit. So those roles really do come together when we show those things. And just lastly, as Derek said, and Ampo, it's interdisciplinary. We're always talking about many different things, food, culinary, arts. They all show up and they all come together in a way that's really unique that a lot of people haven't seen before. And again, just emphasizing that these circles are super important, because if we're not talking about the process, we're not debriefing, we're not making space for each other to share their learning experiences or the things that surprise them, then we're really not educating. And to me, that's the space that needs to be created for authentic Indigenous education. But it's also a place where both Indigenous and non-Indigenous can learn and create really healthy educational experiences. So I'll stop there and pass it back over to.
Thank you, Daryl. Thank you, Derek, Anpo, and Daryl, for your time, expertise, and insightful contribution. Your thought-provoking perspective and enriched our understanding on Indigenous-led education and definitely provided us with valuable knowledge to reflect upon. Now I would like to open the floor for questions. This is like a great opportunity to further engage with our speakers, clarify any point, and explores ideas in more depth. I see there's one hand raised, Jose Maria Coconia. If you want, you can talk. We would like to hear you. Otherwise, feel free to use the chat here. Okay, maybe there are some issues with that, but we stay available via email as well. Maybe Diana Elinam.
Hello.
Hi, Diana.
Hey, good afternoon. I want to thank the speakers for sharing their knowledge with us. I am a storyteller, so I was very curious to listen to what the speakers would say, and I've learned so much beyond belief. It's my first time, and I'm overwhelmed with knowledge. But as a Tanzanian myself, who comes from a line of indigenous people, I just wanted to know how do the speakers bridge the gap between their communities and other communities outside America? Because as I can see, most of the speakers are from Dakota, America. So what about other indigenous people from Asia and Africa, how have they managed to bridge the gap, the gap between them? Because as the people, we are seeking for like one solution to move forward. And yeah, that's just what I wanted to know.
I'd be happy to answer that question. That's
Please.
like one thing that I'm very passionate about is working with indigenous communities on a global scale. In Anishinaabe way, we have the song. It's like a Nagani tobacco song, like lead us tobacco. And what it's doing is that there's lodges, indigenous lodges all around the world on the ground and then also up in the sky. And we're sending that tobacco through all those lodges, and it's all connected. There's a whole trail that leads us all through because we're all closely related than we really believe. And I think that through colonialism, we've all got affected as indigenous people in different ways. So my people, we got really far removed from our language and our food, but maybe somewhere in Africa, they kept that intact. They lost their music or textiles. And when we come together and do cultural exchange work, we can revitalize information within our communities. So a couple examples that I like to share is one, I was visiting some tribes in Ethiopia, and I get to this one village, the Duros village, and all these ladies come out and present sweetgrass to me. I was like, what? You guys got sweetgrass over here? Like that's one of our sacred medicines. And I was really analyzing it too, like really looking at it, like making sure it was like the same plant. And sure enough, it is. So I was like, hey, how do you guys use this? Well, when they kill an animal, they drain the blood. They mix the sweetgrass in there. It has anti-coagulant properties, so it keeps the blood nice and smooth and velvety, where you can like cook with it or just drink it straight up. Keeps that as like best quality. I was like, oh, let me try that over here in the United States. So sure enough, slaughter an animal, mix some fresh sweetgrass in there, and did the exact same thing. So I'm thinking, I was like, oh, my people, we probably used to do this back in the day, but just through time and colonialism, we might have lost that technique. Um, Furthermore, I have an indigenous friend from Ghana. He's a chef, and the yams are native to his region, and they make this dish called wasa wasa, where they keep they peel the yams, but they keep the skins, and they dry it and dehydrate it, turn it into a powder, and then they steam it and it turns into like a couscous kind of dish. I was like, well, shoot. We got tons of wild potatoes here. We got swamp potatoes. We got American ground nuts. We got crow potatoes, a whole bunch of different wild potatoes and tubers. But when my elders taught me how to harvest them, they always just discard the skins, peel it, put the skins back outside. I'm like, oh, I bet we could eat those skins. Let me try to emulate that same dish. Sure enough, it works. So when we get to come together on a global impact, on a global scale, I think we can strengthen not only each other, like I think we strengthen each other's communities. Oh, miigwech.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Derek.
you.
And thank you, Diana, for the question. I think we can quickly take the last one. This is directed to Ampo. What would be your suggestion to young Indigenous women to pursue a career in STEM?
I would say, honestly, it relates back to Deanna's question too about like how do you relate to the rest of the world. Um, and I think for me, coming from where I'm from, there's this like notion or this idea of keeping us in a box, and we're not able to get out of that box and be beyond and more. And so I always challenge people to think beyond the reservation, beyond the United States, beyond even, countries, and think about the stars, like whatever you can do to break your mind past, those boxes that are imposed on us, just as women, as Indigenous women, or even just, anyone. Um, we live in a world where compartmentalization is kind of the thing, and like, there's like this element of like we can't grow past where we are, and I really don't like that. So I think for me, I would encourage you to just know that STEM is everywhere and it's in everything. And whether you're cooking, whether you're building something, you're doing it, and the technicalities of it, like that in itself is a can be done. It's not something that's outside of you. And I think that's a very Indigenous teaching for us too. Is like we know, like Derek knows and Daryl knows that it's inside of us, and it comes natural. And so just, really knowing that it belongs to you, I think will help in your endeavors. And I know it could be challenging and it might seem like this has nothing to do with me, but it really does if you think about it. And the more you look at science and STEM as also just a tool, it's a tool that we can use to address issues that we have, and find solutions. Like, never limiting your ideas on what it is just based off of what other people may have told you or maybe what you've seen. Um, yeah, I hope I answered your question.
I think you did. Thank you for these inspiring words. I would like now to hand it over to the head of youth education program within the World Food Forum Global Youth Action team, Oishin Jill. Over to you.
Thanks, Davide, and thanks everybody for joining us. I'll be really brief. I think everything's been said, but I just want to thank our fantastic speakers, Indigenous educators, Derek Nicholas, Ampo Jensen, Daryl Kootenay. We're so happy and so delighted to be able to share this space for you, for your work, and to connect you with educators around the world as well. Just taking something from each of your sessions, it's really great to look at, how we can use our gifts from Derek, being like a beaver for sure. It's something that we will remember, and how do we make these sessions memorable? I think that's something that people will take from it for sure. And then looking at AMPO and their growth mindset, and we already do have a lot to work with, and we have to be aware of that. There's lots of work ongoing, and sort of linking that as well to Daryl, and just lots of knowledge that we take from our ancestors, but then we're adapting that to our current circumstances as well. So something that I've taken from each of you. Thanks a lot. Thank you all for joining us. And with that, I think we'd like to close with the Educators Network and the first Teachers Lab session. Thank you, Davide, and thank you to Michaela Way as well for organizing all of this. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Thank you.